Welcome to the Highly Evolved Male Summit. My name is Ethan Dukelta, and today we have the amazing Sean Smith. He built a thriving speaking and coaching company, landing him in the top 1% of personal development industry. He has built well over 1,000 articles, audios, and videos on nearly every imaginable topic relating to success and fulfillment. Sean has spoken all over the globe. He has appeared on every TV network and co-created with personal development legends Jack Canfield and Lisa Nichols. And in 2013, he was named North America's next greatest speaker. Welcome to the show, Sean.
Ethan, my brother, it is so good to be here. I appreciate what you're doing, and I appreciate the opportunity to be on with you.
Thank you. No, we appreciate you being here. Thank you very much.
Of course.
So you've clearly got a very interesting story. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, it's, this is what we're going to be talking about, and what you're doing here with the summit is incredibly powerful. But it's not what I thought I would be doing. It's certainly a relatively new conversation for me. About 13 years ago, I was, kind of putzing around in my life. I had two small kids and wanted to be and do and have more. And so I was involved in a bunch of different companies, network marketing companies, sales. I started a couple businesses, and I was just really trying to find myself, really. And I got into the world of personal development, started to attend different events, started to hire coaches, and started to immerse myself in this whole idea of changing your mind and what does it take to be successful. And let me back up a few steps. Actually, when I was 13 years old, I was riding my bicycle to school, and I was almost hit by a car on the right side coming through a stop sign. And I swerved to miss that car, and I actually swerved into traffic right in front of a car doing about 50 miles an hour. I don't know what that translates into. But it's very fast, and it's enough to do some serious damage and kill you. And so there's really, by the details of the accident, there's really no reason that I should have survived. Honestly, I just pulled right out in traffic, and thankfully, obviously, I made it with some injuries, some serious injuries, but they all healed. And I remember as a 13-year-old boy just saying, really understanding for the first time that life can end, right? I mean, intellectually, I knew that I wasn't going to live forever, but I didn't really have that experience, right? And I had not been touched by death in any way by anybody close to me. And so I learned that life is so fragile. And I was on death's doorstep and was blessed enough to be able to walk down. And so I made a lot of choices and decisions and promises that day. And specifically, I promised myself that, if life is so fragile and we only get one shot and we don't know when it's going to end, then I would do everything I could to live a life of excellence, live a life of success, and not settle for mediocrity, and not look back with regret on my life. And I think a lot of people have made those decisions in some way, shape, or form based on something traumatic, like an accident like I had, or watching a movie or reading a book or whatever. And I think it's even more so nowadays that we've got the internet and we're so exposed to personal development and quotes and all these things. So that happened to me when I was 13 years old. And here I was 20 years later. I hadn't created a life that I was proud of. I didn't create the success that I wanted. I didn't feel like I was living. I felt like I was okay, but I wasn't really passionate, but I didn't know what the missing piece was. And I would have all these people tell me that I could succeed. I was a good speaker. I could, create whatever it is that I wanted. So I had a lot of adoration from external input, but I wasn't creating the life that I wanted. And then about 13, 14 years ago, I was in a seminar, and we were just supposed to do a simple exercise that says, where do you want to be in 90 days? So I wrote down my goals for 90 days, and I just started bawling. I started crying uncontrollably, and we were supposed to share our goals with the person next to us, and I couldn't talk. I had this lump in my throat so big that I I couldn't even speak. And he walked me over to one of the co-facilitators, who then took me outside and did a guided visualization. Now I know it was a life coaching process. I didn't know what it was at the time. He did a guided visualization with me, and he helped me identify what the actual anchor was. What was the thing that was holding me back?
Yeah.
And for me, it was this pervasive belief and constant internal thinking of, I'm not good enough and I can't win. And it doesn't matter how hard I try, I'll never be able to achieve peak success. Right. And it goes all the way back to, the girls that I liked that didn't like me back in school, and, all these shameful experiences that I was holding on to. And so that was the moment that everything really shifted for me. In about 15 minutes, Ethan, everything shifted for me because of what this man did in this process. And I was able to reframe and release this gigantic weight that I've been carrying around. And it was like I was lit on fire, man. I wanted to tell everybody about it. I wanted to teach, and have other people experience what I experienced. And so I started talking and sharing, and I was just ignorance on fire. And, people were going, "What are you on, man? And how do I get some?" And I started to live into my dream of being a speaker. I always had this secret dream of being a motivational speaker. And I started to actually live into it and take actions that I was too afraid to take before. And then I wanted to teach athletes for a while. I actually did an event called How to Maximize Your Athletic Ability, but as fate would have it, I was pulled into the world of direct sales, network marketing, but specifically with Mary Kay, the company that sells cosmetics, right? It's a woman-dominated company, and they sell skincare, they sell makeup, basically. And I knew of the company, but I didn't really have any experience with the company. And they were just digging what I was sharing. And so for the next 13 years, all I did was primarily was to teach women. And it was not in my plans whatsoever. It was just a divine appointment, as I say. And what happened was I started to really learn the female mind. I started to learn feminine energy. And what really happened with me is I started to heal my relationship with my mom. And I didn't realize that was why I was drawn into this world. I was just teaching women how to be successful and how to get rid of fears and all that stuff. But inside there was a lot that was happening for me. And I always had a very poor relationship with my mom for about 30 years. I was brutal with her. I was verbally abusive to her. And I had a lot of shame around that. So over the course of, 7 and 8 years of doing this work, specifically with women, I got to the point where I was able to have a conversation with my mom, who thankfully was still alive at the time, and had this massive healing, and through that process and where that's led me since, I've taken a look at my own masculinity. I've taken a look at my own feminine energy. I've taken a look at my relationship with women, my relationship with men, my relationship with myself in relationship to men and women. And I've just looked at my life over the last couple of years in a whole different way, from a different perspective. And what I've learned, Ethan, is that there's so much wounded masculinity that we as men are living with and living from. And so one of my new passions is to be a voice for that masculine energy. Yeah. And it doesn't only live in men, it lives in women as well. But, I grew up as a man, so I know what that journey is like. I know how we're programmed in sports and by society, and what we see in all of these various forms of programming. So I'm really passionate about helping society, and specifically men, confront our masculinity and ask the question, what does it even mean to be a man? Right? Yes. I think what we're taught by society and what we're taught by other men about what it means to be a man is actually toxic. And I don't think it's true.
Yeah.
You know, I think that we are taught that to be a man means you've got to be forceful, means you've got to be powerful, you've got to be strong, right? But you've got to do it the way a manly, rough, bravado, macho man does. And as boys, we don't really understand what that is. So what's happening is we've got these definitions of what it means to be a man. And I'm not saying throw all of them away. There are some truths in masculinity, and I don't want to throw all of them away, but there's some really painful mistakes that we teach ourselves about what it means to be a man. So, you know, what I'm all about, what I'd love to dive in with you is redefining manhood, redefining masculinity, redefining strength, right? Yes. I think as a man, we're programmed. I know I've been rambling here, and I'll throw it to you here in a second. As a man, we're really programmed that we need to do three main things, right? They all start with P. We need to perform, we need to protect, and we need to provide. Those are the tasks that we're given by society, but specifically by the men in society. Those are the tasks that men pass on to their boys, whether it's their young or just the boys in a tribe or in a community. You've got to protect, you've got to provide, and you've always got to perform.
Yes.
And, you know, something that hit me this morning as I was thinking is there's another P on that. We've always got to prove ourselves that we're capable in all three of those areas as well. So there's this overriding proof that most of us pressure ourselves with. There's another P. Maybe by the end of this, there's going to be 7 or 9 Ps. I don't know.
Oh yeah.
But all this pressure from having to prove ourselves in these areas is what creates the combination that becomes so toxic for us. And if we are, I think one of the worst things we can experience as a man is impotence in any of those areas. And impotence not meaning sexually, although it has a sexual connotation, but impotence just means we can't do, right? We can't perform, we can't provide, we can't protect, and we can't prove that we're a man. And that creates shame. And man, when we operate on shame as men, and we've got all the things that we have inside of us that we're not supposed to have and we're not supposed to share, it's just a Molotov cocktail, man, of a ticking time bomb. So I think we need to lean into ourselves as men. We need to lean into each other as men. We need to change the way that we relate to each other. We need to change the way we talk to each other. And ultimately, we need to change the way that we see what masculinity and what manhood is. And then we can heal, man. We can heal ourselves. We can heal our families. We can heal our women. You know, that's what I've been on a journey for the last 13 years, is helping women heal, but doing it from a masculine perspective. So I've got somewhat of a unique journey in that regard. And this is such a big conversation, man. So like I said, you know, I honor you for bringing it forth, and let's contribute to healing the planet.
Thank you. No, absolutely. You're right. It's a massive subject. And do you know what? One of the reasons why I really wanted you on this show was because I saw that you'd done these Facebook posts, and you're on a live video, and you were just really talking from the absolute heart, from a real vulnerable place, you know, about the trauma that, you know, pretty much what you're just talking about now, you know, about as men, we're conditioned to think that we have to be the winners. We have to be the fastest, the most powerful, you know, and if we're, you know, and this relates to these P's, and if we're not, then where is our self-worth, you know? And yeah, I think you're totally right. We really need to redefine what it is to be a masculine man. I think that is a really key piece. So how do men go about, you know, releasing or healing their deep wounds? You know, is there a process, do you know of, that men can go on, or do you deal with this in your business? Or?
Yeah, there is a process for sure, and it varies, you know, because there is no one size fits all. But in order to get to that, let's back up and use the word that you use. I'm glad you brought it. brought it into this conversation, and it's winning. And it is aligned with some of the stuff that I said. It's how do we define winning? You know, the Facebook video that you were mentioning, which I'm happy to share, you know, you can share that link or I can share it with your community. It was a time where I was just deeply connected to this wound of masculinity. And I just got on and kind of just rambled inside of what I felt and what I know so many of us are feeling around, as you said, what it means to win, right? What it means to win as a man, as a boy first, is usually some sort of performance. It's some sort of me beating you, right? The essence of what I think is wounded masculinity is competition. In order for me to win, you have to lose. And we see that play out in a lot of our sports. And of course, there's nothing wrong with sports. But when we take on this identity of needing to win, but the only way to win is to make somebody else lose, then there will always be pain. Either I will have it or you will have it. And since I won't have it, I won't allow myself to have it. That means I'm going to spend all my time making sure that you have it, right? And I grew up in a pretty competitive athletic world where I was basically programmed to believe that in order for me to be a man, in order for me to win, I need to embarrass you. I didn't just want to beat you on the scoreboard. I wanted to dominate you. I wanted to stand over your wounded body, and I wanted to have everybody see that I did this, that I dominated this person, because through my domination of you, I had this illusion that made me strong.
Yeah.
And there's a difference between strength and force, right? We as men, there's nothing wrong with being strong, and we actually have natural strength, but we're taught that strength is about force. Strength is about me controlling you with force, with my muscles, with my threats, with my mind, with some sort of domination, with some sort of control over you. And that's a wounded definition of strength. If we always have to be forceful, then, as I said, there's always going to be a loser. And we cannot come together. We cannot raise each other up. We cannot support one another when my winning requires your losing. And as long as we're operating on force, that's going to be the case, right? Because I need to forcefully prove myself in the domination over you. And you know, this is a man's conversation with other men, right? It starts here. I don't want any of us to blame really anybody. I don't want anybody's of us to blame feminists or to blame women in general or to blame our society. I mean, it's about taking responsibility without blame, because blaming others is another form of force. It's another form of rivalry, right? It's another form of this competition. So I think force is about protection. It's about protecting our manhood, and it's about reacting to other people, to other threats out there. When we are committed to forcefully protecting ourselves, we'll see everybody as a threat. And we would rather protect ourselves from a threat than to be vulnerable and to be dominated, right? So that's the essence of a lot of masculinity. But if we look at what a true masculine rooted strength is, it doesn't need proof. It doesn't need to dominate others. Masculinity is actually very protective by nature, but it's in a divine way. It's not in a competitive way. It's in we are protective in the source of our strength, not protective because we can dominate you. And so true masculine strength is more about being proactive, protecting our loved ones, protecting ourselves, protecting the planet, protecting our boys, protecting everybody really with just our energy, not with our force, not with swords, not with shields. And it's also a very connecting kind of energy, whereas the wounded masculinity of force is separating. It's certainly not connecting. It's all me versus you. And I'm sure you've experienced this through your journey as a man. You know, you meet a man, some kind of a stranger of a man, and our first reaction sometimes is kind of flex a little bit, right? To kind of look him up and down, or to immediately position this person as an adversary,
Yeah.
right? And this might be a brother of ours, you know, otherwise could be a brother of ours, could be a friend of ours. And yet we position other men specifically, or anything that we perceive as a masculine threat or a threat to our masculinity, we position them as an adversary, something and someone that we need to protect ourselves against. And as long as we have that kind of default programming, then we're never going to come together as men, and we're never going to support each other as men. And, you know, one of the things that I've been noticing lately, this is one of the things that we can absolutely do. This is an implementable strategy, is to watch the way that we communicate with other men, especially our younger boys that we have influence over. You know, men very rarely have intimate conversations with other men. Men very rarely have real meaningful conversations with other men because we're not supposed to. It means that we're weak, that we're a pussy, that we're vulnerable, that we're a girl, right? We're told to man up from the very early ages of our programming. And what that does is it causes us to be afraid of each other, and it causes us to be afraid of our own emotions, right? It causes us to be afraid of the things that we have inside. So our language, our male-dominated language, is that of separation, right?
Yes.
And I heard it said recently that the way most men communicate with each other and actually compliment each other is through put-downs, right? That's one of the ways that we communicate with our friends, you know, even if it feels silly, or if it feels like it's not, if it's not very real. It's the male language. It's all about, you know, calling each other fools or stupid or idiots, or focusing on the weaknesses and teasing each other about these weaknesses. Now, on the surface, each one of those little teasings might not be a big deal, but if that's the only way we communicate, or if it's the main way we get communicated to as boys, and then we communicate with our other men, all this is doing is creating more and more separation, to where we as men then don't realize that there are other men going through life with the same vulnerabilities, the same fears, the same pain that we have, because we're actually talking about it, right? But when a man is experiencing this emotional turmoil, but he doesn't believe that other men are, therefore he's the only weak one in the room, that's a dangerous man. That's somebody who's helpless and hopeless. And, you know, and usually men who are wounded tend to hurt others to try to gain their strength back. And so I think if we change the way we communicate as men, I'm on a mission to start having men tell other men, I love you. To start having men hug other men in a genuine way, not a drive-by, not a fist bump, not a grab by the hand and just turn and, you know, bump shoulders, right? Those are the ways that men hug. But you know what? We all need masculine nurturing that most of us didn't get. We either didn't get it from our dads, or we didn't get it from our teachers or our coaches or somebody. We all need that masculine nurturing. And I think that's the answer, Ethan. That we can do as men is be more connected to each other as men by being more connected to ourselves, and just drop all the bullshit of what being a man is supposed to be like. You know, it's so exhausting for us to carry around this gigantic rock of what we think being a man is, and we got to throw that rock and we got to use it. It's just like, God, you know, it's just, it takes so much strength away from us, and it pulls us away from who we are. So the way to actually heal is to surrender into our divine masculinity, rather than try to create this facade of society's masculinity.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just writing some of this down because it's great. I really love the way that you're talking about, you know, surrendering to hugging other guys or hugging people, you know, to make that heart connection and surrender to it, you know, because let's be honest, you it's not something you tend to do. You do just tend to do the, you know, the random kind of half hug, if at most maybe, and, you know, It's a great way. I mean, and I know this from my own experience because I recently did a leadership program, and one of the exercises that we had to hug. Well, actually, we had to hug lots of people we didn't know, and at the beginning it was kind of a bit weird, but once you surrender to it, it actually brings on a whole new way of being and a way of thinking that just releases you and cracks you open. In fact, that's what it does. It cracks you open and
Yes.
drags down the masks and the boundaries and the armor that we've had up, which is just, ruining us, stopping our flow of creativity.
Yeah, that's a very powerful word, armor. And most of us men are armored up. That's why we don't hug. That's why we don't show that emotion. And I had a very similar experience as it relates to hugs. I was in a 7-day event many, many years ago, and every day we went around and hugged all these different people. And I was naturally, I don't know if I would say naturally, but at least programmed to avoid all the men in the room. And I was just going to hug all the women, right? Because that felt better. There's obviously like this natural flirtatiousness and let me find a soft woman, so I can hug up against. And after, I think the third day, I started to hug a few more men, and I had that same shift that you're talking about. All of a sudden I realized this is what I'm missing in my life, and I couldn't put words to it. But then I started to avoid all the women for the rest of the event. The next 4 days, I didn't want to hug the women. I just wanted to find all the men, and I just wanted to dive into something that I couldn't understand at the time, but I just felt that I was missing. Yeah. And there's actually a lot of nurturing inside of masculinity. We think that nurturing only comes from feminine energy. Feminine energy is more nurturing, I would say, as a whole, in terms of the essence of the feminine energy. But there's a lot of nurturing inside true masculine energy, and that's what we miss. That's what we withhold from our boys. That's what we actually withhold from our women as well when we're armored up. So I love that analogy of removing the armor, because we gotta realize that there's really nothing to protect against, right? When we can get to that place where I don't have anything to protect against, then it's easy. And then it's easier to surrender and just be who we naturally are instead of live up to these rules.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So what would your message be to parents of, anyone really? What, is there, you specialize in parenting, is that right, as well?
Yeah, that's one of the things that I coach a lot of people around. I'm starting to coach different applications of this masculine-feminine dynamic. So relationships is a huge one. I've got a book coming out with my wife. We wrote a book called You Can't Complete Me. And a lot of it has to do with the masculine-feminine dynamic and men and women. And when one partner is incomplete, and the other partner is tasked with completing them, you've got a dangerous relationship, right? And this is very difficult for a lot of men to come to that place of completeness in terms of being whole and complete. But going back to what you said about parenting, I've been interested in parenting for a long time because so many of these challenges that we have that I see in my life coaching business or business coaching business pretty much all stem from our childhood, right? Whether it's early childhood or teenage years, it stems from the foundation that was built when we were younger. And so I have a deep passion of educating parents. Listen, the way that we parent our children now is going to form the foundation that they will build their lives upon, right? And their beliefs are formed in childhood, and the decisions that they make about themselves and life and success and money and all these things are formed in childhood. And they're watching what you're doing in your relationships. If you're still married, they're watching the marriage. If you're not married anymore, they're watching how you treat their mothers or their aunts or just women in general. They're watching the show constantly. And most parents don't realize how influential, and this might sound weird because everybody knows that our job as a parent is to raise a human being, but we actually don't realize how influential our beliefs are, our actions are. They're watching so much and they're taking on so much. And the little boys naturally want to be like the fathers, and the little girls naturally want to be like the mothers. So I've been teaching in the parenting world for quite a while now, and I also have a book coming out that I'll share more about for fathers with daughters, because this is specifically this conversation that you and I are in. What I've learned over 13 years of coaching primarily women, what do women need from their dads? Because almost all of women's challenges when it comes to business and probably anything in life is related to their self-esteem and their confidence. And that all starts with their fathers. So I'm writing this book for men with daughters, teaching them what their daughters need to know, what they need to see, what they need to hear, what they need to feel, what they need to experience. And in doing that, I'm bringing men into the conversation that we're having. What is it to be a man? What is it to have emotions? How can we teach our little girls or our boys? This book is just specifically for dads with daughters, but the concepts apply with slightly different applications to boys as well. And it applies from women too, but specifically in this conversation, how can we make emotions safe as a man, right? The children are looking up at the father saying, how do we deal with life? They're asking the father unconsciously, teach me, how do I deal with emotions? Is it okay for me to have emotions? Right? Little boys are seeing the father going, I'm going to be like you. Little girls are seeing the father going, I'm going to maybe marry you, or I'm going to confront this kind of masculine energy. And so a lot of times us as men, because we don't know how to handle our own emotions, we teach our boys and our girls that emotions are dangerous, that emotions are scary, and therefore they live the rest of their lives being afraid of emotions in general, whether they have them or being afraid of other people with emotions. And so much of our adult lives is based on the foundation of what we learned in childhood. Now, that doesn't mean that any of it can't be changed. It can all be changed. And I would say that's the essence of transformational work, is how do we go in and take a look at the foundation that needs to be shifted. But for men, I would say, to go back to your question, what can we do? What are some of the things we can do? As fathers, we need to be safe with ourselves. We need to trust our own masculinity. We need to not teach our families that to be a man, you have to yell, you have to be forceful, you have to be use threats, you have to be rough and tough and never cry. So what I want to teach men is your children need to see emotion. They need to see that emotion is okay. They need to see that their daddy, who they hold in a place of pride and reverence and love and unconditional connection, that he can cry and not lose my affection for him. That's the place that it can be taught, is our children can go, I just saw that man cry and I still love him. We're afraid of people seeing us cry and losing their affection for us, or losing their respect for us, or losing these things that we're afraid of losing. So we have to trust ourselves as men that crying or having fear or having pain or any kind of emotion does not take our man card away. It does not mean that we're weak. It does not mean that we're a pussy. It does not mean that we're a girl. It does not mean any of those things that we're afraid of it meaning. What it means is that we're human. And there is not a human being that doesn't have emotions unless they are psychopathic, right? So emotional experiences are human. They're not woman, they're not feminine, they're not female, they're human.
Yeah.
And when we can be emotional and still retain our manhood, now we've got a healthy connection to our humanity inside of our masculinity. The other thing that I would say specifically about boys, let your boys cry. Let them cry. Don't shame them for crying. Don't try to get them to man up and be strong. Usually we tell our little boys specifically, although we tell our girls this too, for the same reasons. We tell people, be strong. Really what we're telling them is don't cry, because I'm uncomfortable with your tears. I'm uncomfortable in the presence of emotion, so I don't want you to be emotional. That's an internal journey. When we as men can be okay with the presence of our own emotion, then we will be able to to step forward and have a big, gigantic, masculine hug, either figuratively or literally, for our little boys or for our little girls or for our wives or for our brothers or for our friends in the presence of their emotions. That's the protection of divine masculinity, and that heals like nothing else, man. We don't actually need to do anything to produce the healing. We need to surrender into our divine masculinity that already heals. That's the difference.
Wow, I love it. Yeah, and
this is good stuff, man. This is I feel it, and I feel a connection to men in a way that I've never felt before, because I really haven't done a whole lot of work with men. But I'm telling you, this is the stuff that really resonates with so many masculine men. And if our societies are going to shift to be more about connection rather than protection, then I'm thoroughly convinced, Ethan, that this is the work. Healing what I call the masculine wound is the work that needs to be done. And then the ripple effect of that will heal anything that the world needs to be healed.
I think you're right. And you're just flowing this stuff. It's all coming through you, mate. Seriously. The wisdom is flowing through you. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You're so right with that. And I love the way that you clarified that, it's not, being a maturely masculine man, or whatever you want to call it, is not about necessarily becoming more like a woman. It's actually just embodying what you already are, which is embodying more of your humanity, the emotions that are already there, and helping people that way.
I think what hit me as you were just saying is, for a man to embrace his femininity, it actually increases the strength of our masculinity. And we think that it's either or. We think that you're either feminine or you're masculine. And the truth is, they work so beautifully together. But when the masculine is afraid of the feminine, or when the masculine is afraid of being vulnerable, then the masculine creates a disruption, and it creates a chasm, and it drives a wedge between its own feminine energy. And then it's castration, to a certain extent. It's like energetic castration, because then when the masculine disconnects itself from its own feminine, then all it has is this wounded masculine to try to protect from that point forward. So when we can embrace and adopt our own feminine energy and realize that it doesn't mean that we become less of a man. In fact, it actually means that we become more of a man. It gives us more of the ability to protect and provide and perform when we adopt everything that we are. And you used a word that I've been using a lot lately. It's our humanity, right? There's humanity inside of us that we need to adopt. And, speaking of this feminine place, and you mentioned my Facebook video a while ago.
Yeah, it's great.
I wrote a passage. Thank you. I really appreciate that. I wrote a passage a couple of weeks ago about this wounded masculine. And if it's okay with you, I'd love to read it, because I think it fits right into this conversation.
I read that as well. It's brilliant. Yeah, please.
Great.
If it's the same thing. Yeah.
It's called The Wounded Masculine. So I'm just going to read it for a few minutes here. The wounded masculine is terrified of the divine feminine. Let me give context to this real quick. It was written in response to a woman who asked me if her dad will ever be able to heal so that her dad could tell her, "I'm proud of you." And I've gotten a bunch of different comments or questions similar in that from women primarily, who say, "My husband will never do this. My ex-husband, my father, they'll never be able to be that kind of evolved male like you're talking about. So what do I do? Is there any hope?" And this was written in response to this woman who, my assessment was, hopeless in that moment. Like I don't understand my dad, and there are so many little girls specifically, but little boys also, who are waiting for their dad to come back. It's almost like the little girl waiting at the bus stop and the bus never comes. She's waiting for her dad to come back and rescue her. She's waiting for her dad to come back and hug her and love her and tell her, I'm proud of you. And so a lot of these girls don't understand the journey, and it turns into anger and resentment and all these things that then don't support the girl either in their world. And then that gets, that gets transferred out. So that's the context of this. I was written to a woman, and I wanted to try to explain what the wounded man is like so that she can understand a little bit more about what her father's patterns are. But then what it turned into was something that I didn't plan on. So it evolved as I was writing it. The wounded masculine is terrified of the divine feminine. This is why some dads can't express love or kindness toward their daughters. It's not that they don't love the little girl they created. Of course they do. But the wounded masculine is committed to never letting anyone or anything expose its weakness and vulnerability. And guess what the divine feminine does? She shines her light, not to expose or to confront or to embarrass anyone else. That's not the purpose. She shines her light to share her love. However, the effect of that shining light, that pure love on the wounded masculine, is exposing and confronting and embarrassing. So in response, the wounded masculine often protects its wound through forceful control, abuse, violence, rage, believing it can overpower the feminine strength or mute the feminine voice. And when it does that, it won't have its weaknesses exposed, or it will escape the threat. Physically, emotionally, or energetically, it will deny the very presence of the divine feminine, both internal within its own human body and external in other human bodies. Not because it doesn't love, but because it fears love. It fears the effect that love has on it. It was not taught that the presence of pure love is safe, so it does not feel safe in the presence of pure love. This is why he runs. This is why he yells. This is why he controls. This is why he numbs himself. This is why he abuses himself and others. He is hurting and doesn't know how to heal the pain. And like a disoriented person on fire, he tries to just outrun the flames, not realizing that he's actually fueling them. You, the divine feminine, the arresting, breathtakingly beautiful spirit, are not the problem. You are merely exposing the problem that the wounded masculine does not want to be exposed. It will gnarl or growl or bite or maim or kill to the same extent as the depth of the wound it's protecting. So please do not pretend this is your inadequacy, divine feminine. It is not. Do not pretend the lesson is for you to dim your light. It is not. Do not pretend the solution is your hiding. It is not. Do not pretend the answer is for you to stop loving. It is not. The wounded masculine runs and runs and runs from others, yes, but mostly from self. The fire is not on the outside. It burns within. So to you, the wounded masculine, stop running, stop hurting, and start healing. Our boys, our girls, our men, our women, our brothers, our sisters, our society, our species have all suffered enough. Their blood and tears cannot fill your void. This wound will run until one of two things happens. It will run until its legs can no longer run, its arms can no longer punch, its lungs can no longer breathe, and its heart can no longer beat, death bringing an end to the suffering. Or it will learn that running cannot extinguish the fire that burns its own flesh. It will learn that punishing others does not confirm strength. It will finally stop, look inward, and see the boy, the wounded self it has all along been running from. That boy with those teary eyes and that quivering lip that pierces the false thickness of the heavy armor. It will learn that the answer is not to keep running from that boy because he cries. The answer is to love that boy because he cries. To you, divine masculine, please rise. Stop running and answer this boy's tears with love, not with fear, with presence, not with abandonment, with protection, not with punishment. This boy, look down at him, not down on him, as he looks up at you. See the beauty in him as he smells the boldness in you. He yearns this boy. Sit him on your lap. Kiss him on the cheek and stroke his hair with your strong fingers. Do not place him over your lap and abuse his young body because his innocence and his humanity scare your wound. He is wise, this boy. He is strong, this boy. He is you, this boy. He needs to experience your touchness, not your toughness. This boy's love is your protection. This boy's wisdom is your lesson. This boy's vulnerability is your strength. And this boy's forgiveness is your liberation. Forgive yourself in his presence and let him sit you on his lap, this boy. So, man, that took me to a whole nother place, brother. And woo, that boy.
Yeah. Oh my God. Such amazing words of wisdom you have there. Seriously, that's quite something. You know, it's really food for thought, you know? Yeah.
And since I wrote that, especially, thank you for all that, Ethan, and thank you for letting me read it. Since I wrote that, especially, you know, I have a 13-year-old boy, and he's in that time where he's trying to discover himself and who he is and what he is. And he's going through all these emotions and, you know, sexuality and girls and boys and toughness and all this stuff. You know, that's a very turbulent time. And especially since I wrote that and when I wrote that, man, I was bawling so hard. I was just putting words to the pain I was feeling and to the experiences I was having and to the yearning that I was having. I was just putting words to it. And since I wrote that, I've actually been sitting my 13-year-old boy on my lap more than I ever did. And I've been stroking his hair, and I've been telling him that he is, I haven't said you are a man because that's not our conversation, at least not now. But I've been telling him that I love him so much for who he is and not what he does. You know, for his humanity and for his softness. I've got a very sweet, tender child. And it's interesting. He's more sweet and tender than my daughter is. And you would think that maybe those would be reversed by society's roles and society's programming. But he's much more tender, and he's more vulnerable, and he's more sweet. And so my wife and I are really making it a point to praise him for those things, because the wounded masculine will do the opposite. The wounded masculine will demean him for those things, which is everything we've been talking about. And he needs to know that it's okay. And we all need to know as boys that it's okay as men to be vulnerable and a man, to be emotional and a man, to be feminine and be a man. That's where we can heal and connect these two energies, as well as connect ourselves to ourselves, connect ourselves to each other, and protect this planet, protect our families, protect our girls, protect our women, protect our boys, protect ourselves with true divine, strong masculinity, not wounded, armored up masculinity that's going to leave somebody bloody.
It's beautiful, man. Beautiful. I'm afraid we are running out of time.
Yeah, I know we could go on and on and on, but I do want to respect the time, and I appreciate this space so much, Ethan.
No problem. No, it's incredible having you. So to finish off, you have a free gift. It's a download of your upcoming book, Daddy, Are You Proud of Me? And a free private coaching call with you. Tell us about this.
Yeah, it's, you know, this book is going to be released in the next few months, as of the time that we're recording this, early 2019. And as I said, it's specifically written for men with daughters, but it's taken on a life of its own, Ethan, which is really cool. It's actually provided to be quite healing for women who are reading the book, because it's as if they're listening to a coaching conversation between me and their dad, or me and whatever masculine channels they've been influenced by in their lives. And it's also provided to, or proved to be very healing for men that don't have daughters, or men that don't even have children, because I'm using the application of a man and a daughter, but all the concepts apply. You know, as I said earlier, it's about coming face to face with who we are as men and our emotions inside of our humanity and inside of our masculinity. And what do our little girls need but the single man out there who has no daughter, that you can replace what your own feminine channel needs from yourself. It's like you can take what I'm talking about in this book, being you have an entity, you have this human being with a body who's feminine and female and called a daughter. This is what she needs. Or we can say we all have that essence inside of us too, and that's what she needs as well. So it doesn't matter if we're talking about an actual tangible daughter or we're talking about the feminine spirit. This is really about masculine healing. Yeah. So anybody can get that. It's coachseansmith.com/highly evolved male for the people in this summit. That's a link that's only out there, obviously, for the people in this summit. Highly evolved male, have all hyphens in between, highly evolved male.
I'll stick it in so they can see it.
You can just go ahead and click it. And I also wanted to give men the opportunity to jump on the phone, because, you asked earlier, what's the process or process? You say it better than we Americans. What's the process for doing this work? And, the reality is it's an individual game. I mean, we can talk about generalities for sure. We can talk about the healing, but the way that I'm holding on to my masculine wound is different than the way you're holding on to yours. And the protective mechanisms that I've created are different than the protective mechanisms that you've created. So maybe somebody has become a bully. I became a bully to my mom to protect my wound. Other people will be more violent. I was never physically violent. I was just a verbal bully. Not just that it doesn't matter, but it, for whatever reason, it didn't become physical. Some people become physical. Some people do drugs or alcohol. Some people hurt themselves. Some people hurt randomly. So there's different ways that we as a complex individual person hold on to our conflicts, our wounds, our sense of masculinity. Who our father was is a consideration, whether he was there, whether he wasn't there. All of those things are individual in nature. So I wanted to provide the people in coming to your summit an opportunity to jump on the phone. And I will personally do these calls. I know we're opening this up to potentially thousands and thousands and thousands of people, but this is a passion that I have. These are free calls. This is a passion that I have, that I want to talk to as many men as I possibly can right now in this conversation. So that's what people can get. They can get the free read of the book, and they can get a coaching call with me directly to dive more into this. And I can provide whatever support I can offer in any way that I can to help as many men as we can.
That is so very, very generous of you. Thank you so much. And any guys, Absolutely. I'd highly advise go for it. It's a very generous offer. So thank you, Sean. Thank you for being on the show. You've just literally channeled like a whole load of wisdom at us, and it's been amazing. So much to really think about and take home. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you.
I appreciate that. And we can't leave without saying, Ethan, I love you.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone listening, and don't forget to tune in tomorrow for another amazing episode. We'll have another speaker on, stay tuned for that. And other than that, peace to you all. Much love.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ethan.
Thank you.